Welcome to A Powerless Mage Presents. Today, we're going to take a really deep dive into something I think everyone feels but maybe doesn't always talk about. That kind of background hum of dissatisfaction. You know what I mean, right? You achieve things, you get praise, maybe things are objectively okay, but there's still this nagging feeling, like something's missing, or you're not quite measuring up. It's this invisible pressure. And it's easy to think, oh, it's just me, maybe I'm flawed. But what if it's not? What if it's a mechanism? Our mission here is to pull back the curtain on that mechanism we're calling it the imaginary. And more than just understanding it, we want to give you some real practical tools from our sources to help you maybe dismantle its hold a bit. This isn't just theory. We're aiming for stuff you can use to genuinely improve things.
Exactly. That feeling you mentioned, that dissatisfaction, that's actually a really important signal. It signals a clash, basically. A gap between what you expect maybe unconsciously and what's actually happening. And it feels so draining because often we don't even know what we're fighting against. It's like wrestling a ghost, you know? So the big benefit here, the reason we're unpacking this, is to give you the concepts, the language, to name that source of friction. Because once you can name it, you stop shadowboxing, you can actually start working on the real mechanism. And that right there is the first step to feeling better and getting back some control.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's make this invisible thing a bit more visible. Where do we start? What exactly is this imaginary?
Right, so if this thing is running the show behind the scenes, we need a clear handle on it. Our source material gives us a definition that's, well, it's pretty direct. It says, the imaginary is what you think you are, but you are not. Simple as that, almost. Almost deceptively simple, right? But it points straight to that core conflict we all live with. On one side, you've got this idea of yourself. Maybe it's perfect, always successful, never makes mistakes, always knows the right thing to say. That's the imaginary self.
Highlight reel version.
Totally. And then on the other side, there's you, the actual you. Imperfect, limited, human, real.
And the clash happens because facing the real self, acknowledging limitations or mistakes, that can be uncomfortable. Sometimes really uncomfortable.
Absolutely. It's much easier, much more tempting in the moment to just retreat into that idealized version. It feels safer, maybe, like wrapping yourself in this perfect idea. That's taking refuge in the imaginary.
Okay, so it sounds like a defense mechanism almost.
Yeah.
But you said it's the source of misery. If it feels safer or more comfortable, why isn't it good? Why does leaning into this ideal self make things worse?
Because it's a setup. It's a trap you build for yourself. That imaginary self, by its very nature, sets expectations that reality can never consistently meet. Expectations about how you should perform, what you should achieve, how others should treat you.
Based on a version of you that doesn't actually walk around in the world.
Exactly. So when reality inevitably falls short of that impossible ideal, the result isn't just disappointment, it's this heavy value judgment. It's anger, frustration, that feeling of being cheated or inadequate. It generates misery because the benchmark is fundamentally unreal.
So choosing reality, even the messy parts, is actually the path away from that misery. That makes sense.
It's the only path, really. Accepting reality over self-deception. That's the choice.
Okay, so understanding that dynamic is key. But this imaginary self, it doesn't just appear out of thin air, right? Where does it come from? How does it get built?
Oh, it's built over a lifetime. Think of it like layers building up. It comes from everywhere. Your family's values, the culture you grow up in, societal ideas about success, what you see in the media, school, work. It's constant conditioning.
Like an invisible curriculum for who you should be.
Precisely. An entire ecosystem pushing you towards an ideal that no real person can actually embody, not perfectly.
Now, the natural reaction when you hear this might be to think, okay, who gave me this idea? Was it my parents, that teacher, society? People want to find the origin, the culprit.
Right. That's a very common first instinct. Let's grab a Bible and dig into the past, find the root cause.
Which sounds like therapy, maybe. Trying to trace it all back. But our source material actually advises against getting too bogged down in that historical detective work, at least for immediate improvement. Why is that? Why isn't finding the specific source the most useful first step?
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? But there are a couple of really important reasons. First, pinning down one source is incredibly difficult, almost impossible. These things are woven together, often mixed in with genuinely good advice or necessary coping mechanisms from the past.
It's not like one single event installed the Be Perfect software.
Exactly. And second, maybe more importantly, focusing too much on the why from the past can lead to, well, getting stuck. Analysis paralysis. You can spend ages diagnosing how you got this way. My upbringing made me this way. But that diagnosis doesn't actually change the thought pattern that's making you miserable right now.
Ah, so it shifts the focus from what you can do now to who's to blame for the past.
Precisely. It becomes about finding an excuse or assigning blame rather than taking action on the thoughts you're having today. You end up maybe trading one kind of misery trying to live up to the ideal for another, like bitterness about the past or resentment towards whoever you think installed the faulty programming.
So the advice is really pragmatic then.
Yeah.
And saying, look, we know conditioning happens. We know culture bombards us with unreal ideals. Just look at social media, right? The pressure is real. But instead of getting lost in the how it got there, we pivot straight to, okay, this thought just popped up now. What am I going to do about it?
Yes. That's the key pivot. You bypass that whole cul-de-sac of blame and historical digging. You don't need the full blueprint of how the imaginary was constructed to start taking it apart, brick by brick. You just need the tools to spot it when it's operating now and stop feeding it.
So the benefit is speed, really, moving straight to action.
And agency. The moment you shift focus from blaming the past to managing the present, you're taking back control. You're already weakening the imaginary's grip.
Okay, so here's a question for you, the listener, to reflect on. Have you ever really stopped and thought about all those external messages from family, work, society about who you should be, and then really contrasted that with who you feel you actually are, that gap, that tension? That's the battleground we're talking about. Right, so this imaginary is the engine driving that dissatisfaction. The first job is learning to recognize its voice. You might think, oh, it's this deep, complex, subconscious thing, but actually it often reveals itself in really common, everyday language patterns in our own heads.
Yeah, it's much more accessible than people think. Spotting it is the first step towards doing something about it. If you can catch it in the act, you can stop it from running the whole show, ruining your mood, or dictating your actions.
So we're looking for specific verbal tells.
Right.
Like warning signs flashing in our internal dialogue.
Exactly. Warning signs that an unreal expectation is bumping up against reality. Our sources point to 3 really common phrases that are big red flags. These are the phrases that tell you the imaginary is likely talking, not your rational mind or your authentic self.
Okay, let's hear them. What should we be listening for inside our own thoughts?
First one, and it's a big one, is the internal demand, usually about how you should be performing or appearing.
I should.
Like I should have known better, or I should be more successful by now, or I should feel happier about this.
Precisely. That's the imaginary setting an internal benchmark. The second one flips it outward, directing the demand onto others. Others should. Right. They should be more competent. He should understand me without me explaining. People should drive better, that kind of thing. That's where a lot of frustration with the world comes from, isn't it?
A huge amount. It's expecting the world and everyone in it to conform to your ideal. And the third one is when things get escalated, when a simple problem feels like a disaster. If this doesn't happen, something's wrong with...
Okay, so if I don't get this job, something's wrong with me. Or if this plan fails, something's wrong with my ability. It attaches this huge weight of failure to an outcome.
Exactly. It turns a potential setback into a judgment on your fundamental worth or competence. It ramps up the stakes emotionally.
Just learning to spot those 3 phrases, I should, others should, and if this doesn't happen, something's wrong with. That alone feels incredibly powerful.
It is, because the moment you hear one of those in your head, you can pause. You can say, oh, wait a minute. Is that reality speaking, or is that the imaginary with its impossible demands?
You get a choice point. You can recognize it as an unreal expectation before it triggers the anger or the shame or the frustration.
That's the immediate benefit. You gain that split second of awareness, that ability to step back and choose a more rational, less emotionally charged response. You stop being automatically hijacked by it.
Now, you mentioned I should feel happier. Let's dive into that one specifically, because the idea that I should be happy all the time feels like, well, it's everywhere in our culture.
Yeah.
But the sources suggest this is not just wrong, it's actually biologically inaccurate.
Yeah, this one's huge, and it causes so much unnecessary suffering. The source material makes a pretty radical claim. It argues that from a biological evolutionary perspective, humans are kind of designed to be, well, not constantly happy, maybe intermittently dissatisfied.
Okay, that sounds bleak. Why would we be designed for unhappiness? How does that work?
It sounds bleak if you hold on to the myth that constant happiness is the goal. But think about it from a survival perspective. If you were perfectly, blissfully happy and content 100% of the time, what would happen? I guess you wouldn't try to change anything. or strive for anything more.
Exactly. You'd become complacent, you wouldn't adapt, you wouldn't improve your situation, you wouldn't look for better resources or safety. Evolutionarily speaking, constant bliss is a recipe for stagnation. And stagnation leads to, well, not surviving long term.
So a certain level of dissatisfaction, or maybe restlessness is a better word, is actually the engine that drives us.
That's the argument. That low-grade restlessness, that feeling that things could be better, is what motivates growth, problem-solving, learning, adaptation.
Yeah.
It keeps us moving forward. So the natural human state isn't constant contentment. It's more like seeking, striving, adapting, which inherently involves the tension of a goal not yet reached or a problem not yet solved.
Wow, so accepting that tension is normal, rather than a sign that something's wrong with you, that could lift a huge weight.
It absolutely can. The pressure of the "I should be happy all the time" myth just dissolves when you see it's based on a false premise about how we're wired. But if that's the biological truth, why is society, marketing, social media, even sometimes friends and family, constantly telling us the opposite, selling us constant happiness?
Well, think about it. Which narrative is better for selling things? Except that growth involves discomfort, or buy this product service experience and finally achieve constant happiness.
Yeah, the second one, obviously.
Right. The myth that dissatisfaction is a flaw that can be fixed by something external that fuels endless consumerism. The imaginary loves this narrative because it keeps the expectation impossibly high. The biological truth is much harder to sell ads against.
And sticking to that myth has real consequences, forcing us into choices that might not actually align with who we are. The source uses the classic example, the high-paying job versus the potentially less lucrative vocation.
Yes, let's walk through that because it shows the imaginary trapping people from both sides. Imagine someone in a high-status, well-paid corporate job. They've ticked all the boxes society says should lead to happiness, the money, the title, the lifestyle.
The imaginary says, you should be happy now.
Right, but maybe deep down the work feels meaningless to them. It's completely disconnected from their actual values or what they feel called to do. So they feel miserable, empty, despite having achieved the external ideal. They're betraying their authentic self to satisfy the imaginary's definition of success.
Okay, so the ideal is met, but it rings hollow. What about the other side? The person pursuing their passion, maybe an artist, a teacher, someone in a helping profession.
So this person might feel a strong sense of purpose, alignment, authenticity in their work. But maybe the pay isn't great, maybe recognition is scarce. Then the imaginary steps in with its judgments. You should be earning more, you should have more stability, you should be more widely recognized for your talents.
So the misery doesn't come from the work itself, which they might love, but from the imaginary comparing their situation to a different, often conflicting ideal, like financial success.
Exactly. In both cases, the executive feeling empty despite the money, and the artist feeling inadequate despite the purpose. The imaginary acts as the judge, holding up an impossible, often contradictory standard. It ensures you feel dissatisfied regardless of the path, until you challenge the idea that external perfection is the key to internal peace.
This constant unresolvable tension, when it gets really extreme, it can manifest in some pretty difficult outward behavior, which leads us to that caricature you mentioned, the Karen or Ken stereotype.
Right. And it's important to stress we're using this as an illustration of the psychological mechanism at its most visible, not as a way to label or judge real people. It's like an extreme case study that helps us see the underlying dynamics.
So this caricature is someone living completely inside their imaginary.
Pretty much entirely, yes. They seem to operate from a set of core beliefs about themselves and the world that are completely detached from reality, driven purely by shoulds.
Let's list some of those core imaginary beliefs that seem to drive that behavior. Things like,
I should get special treatment because I'm inherently important. My needs and time are more valuable than others. I should be respected automatically without earning it. And, crucially, things should go my way, and if they don't, someone else is at fault and needs to fix it or be punished.
wow. Stated plainly like that, it's clearly unsustainable.
Completely. So the conflict erupts the moment reality pushes back against any of those beliefs. And the reaction is often way out of proportion because for them, it's not just a small inconvenience. It feels like an attack on their entire constructed identity.
Okay, let's use that supermarket story from the sources to see this in action. A man helps an older woman get something off a high shelf. Then another customer approaches him.
Right, the Karen in this story. She sees him helping and immediately assumes he works there. She demands, "Are you done with her? Good. Now tell me where some product is."
He calmly says, "Oh, sorry, I don't actually work here." That's the reality check.
That's reality colliding with her imaginary premise, which is probably something like, people in stores who help others must be employees, and employees should serve me instantly.
So what happens in her head, according to this model? Why the explosion?
Because her imaginary self cannot be wrong, admitting she made a mistaken assumption, oh, sorry, my mistake, would require acknowledging a tiny moment of imperfection. And for someone deeply invested in their imaginary, that's intolerable. So the reality, I don't work here, must be false. He must be lying. He must be deliberately refusing to help her personally. The only way to protect her imaginary self-concept is to attack reality.
Which leads to the accusations, the demand to see a supervisor, the threat of getting him fired.
Yeah.
All to avoid admitting a simple error.
Exactly. She escalates, creates hostility, involves others, likely ruins her own shopping trip, and storms off feeling furious and victimized. All because her imaginary couldn't handle a tiny crack in its perfect facade. She chose maintaining the imaginary world over just finding her product.
That's a powerful illustration of the imaginary dictating behavior, even when it's completely counterproductive.
And the value of this caricature, again, isn't to point fingers outward, but to hold up a mirror. The source suggests using it as a kind of internal litmus test. When you catch yourself thinking, why am I having to wait this long? Or, this person should know better, or I deserve X more than they do. Pause. Does that thought pattern sound a bit like the underlying logic of the caricature?
If it does, that's a strong clue it's coming from your imaginary, not from a rational assessment of the situation.
Recognizing that similarity is the first step to consciously choosing not to act like the caricature. It helps you catch those impulses before they lead to unnecessary conflict or unhappiness in your own life.
Okay, another reflection point for you listening. Which specific should, maybe one you apply to yourself or one you apply to others, tends to complicate your life the most? Which one generates the most friction or stops you from just dealing with reality as it is? Okay, so we've defined the imaginary, we know its origins aren't the main focus for now, and we've learned to listen for its signature, tune those shoulds. Now we get properly practical. Tool number one for weakening its grip, self-observation. And the key here seems to be engaging our rational side.
That's absolutely central. Remember, the imaginary operates mainly on emotion, instinct, knee-jerk reactions. It thrives in that uncontrolled feeling space. Trying to fight one feeling like the imaginary's anger with another feeling like guilt or more anger just keeps you playing on its home turf. The only real counterforce we have is our rational, objective mind. We have to consciously bring that online to keep the emotional demands in check.
So how do we do that? What's the actual technique? The source calls it the spectator technique.
Yeah, it's about cultivating a specific kind of detachment. You practice observing your own actions, your thoughts, your emotional flare-ups, almost as if you were watching someone else. Like viewing a movie of your own life from the outside.
Creating a bit of distance between I and the behavior.
Exactly that distance. And that's where the power lies. But it requires real discipline, particularly around one core principle, the rule of non-judgment.
Okay, non-judgment. That sounds crucial, but also hard. If I observe myself messing up badly, say losing my temper or making a costly mistake, isn't some judgment natural? Isn't that how we learn?
See, that's the subtle but critical distinction. It's not about ignoring the consequences or pretending the mistake didn't happen. It's about avoiding the emotional value judgment you layer on top of it. If your immediate internal reaction is, I'm such an idiot for yelling, or I'm a terrible person for feeling angry, you've just plunged right back into the imaginary's world of shame and self-attack.
Which doesn't actually help fix the behavior, it just makes you feel awful.
Right. Non-judgment means sticking to objective description. Describe the situation, describe your reaction, describe the outcome like a scientist observing an experiment. No loaded emotional adjectives like good, bad, stupid, awful. So instead of I'm a failure because I lost my cool, it becomes observation. In situation X, my voice volume increased significantly. This correlated with person Y becoming defensive and the initial problem remained unresolved. Conclusion. This communication strategy was ineffective for achieving the desired outcome.
Okay, shifting from I am bad to that strategy was ineffective. That's a massive reframe. It takes the personal sting out of it and makes it about finding a better strategy next time.
Precisely. It focuses on data and efficiency, not moral condemnation. And the goal isn't just to analyze past events like this, but to eventually get good enough at self-observation that you can catch these patterns as they're happening or even anticipate them.
So you recognize the trigger, you feel the usual emotional wave starting to build, but because you're observing, you have a moment to interrupt the automatic reaction.
Yes. That's the ultimate aim. You move from being swept away by the emotional tide, which is how the imaginary keeps control, to being the conscious captain of your own ship, choosing the most effective course based on the actual conditions, not just reacting blindly.
Let's make this concrete with that restaurant example from the source.
Right.
You get the bill, it's clearly wrong, way too high. The immediate gut reaction is probably anger, feeling ripped off.
Yep. The imaginary instantly pipes up, "How dare they? This is outrageous. They should be competent. Attack."
Okay, so without self-observation, you just follow that feeling.
Right. Option 1, imaginary rules. You launch into it. Maybe raise your voice, accuse the waiter of incompetence or trying to cheat you. You might get a brief flash of feeling powerful or righteous.
But the observer notes.
The observer notes. Subject displayed aggressive verbal behavior. Consequence. Waiter adopted defensive posture, became less cooperative, probability of smooth resolution decreased significantly. Evening enjoyment levels plummeted. The strategy failed.
Okay, option 2. Self-observation is active.
Right. First, you notice the anger rising. The spectator part of you says, okay, anger detected, adrenaline increasing. But you don't let the anger steer the ship. You consciously access the rational mind. What is the actual goal here? Goal: get the bill corrected efficiently and pleasantly. Then, what is the most effective strategy to achieve that goal? Rational mind concludes. Calmness and politeness are more likely to elicit cooperation than aggression.
So you take a breath.
You take a breath, you calmly point out the error to the waiter, maybe say something like, "Excuse me, I think there might be a mistake on this charge here. Could you take a look? I understand these things happen."
And the likely result.
Much higher probability of cooperation. The waiter sees you as reasonable, not an attacker. They're more likely to apologize, investigate, and fix it quickly. The observer notes. Calm, polite strategy employed. Consequence: waiter cooperative, bill corrected efficiently, evening enjoyment levels maintained. You chose the effective path because you managed the initial emotional surge.
That deliberate management, though.
Yeah.
The source calls this whole process of facing the imaginary with reality lifting weights. It implies it's not easy. It takes effort.
It absolutely takes effort, especially at first. You're essentially trying to override deeply ingrained automatic emotional habits. It is like starting a new exercise regime. Your emotional muscles might scream in protest initially when you try to pause and be rational instead of just reacting. The imaginary might fight back even harder for a bit.
But like exercise.
Like exercise, the more you practice, the stronger that rational muscle gets. The pauses become easier, the choices become clearer, and the satisfaction of choosing your response instead of being driven by it, that's a really powerful reward. It builds on itself.
We can also apply this rational observation to test those nagging should thoughts directly, right?
Yeah.
Like that very common one. They pay me too little for what I do at work. That thought can poison your whole work experience.
Oh, absolutely. It breeds resentment day in, day out. The imaginary presents it as a self-evident truth justifying your unhappiness, but self-observation demands we actually test it against reality.
So the rational question isn't, do I feel underpaid based on my effort or my self-worth?
No. The rational question, the one you ask as the detached observer, is, objectively, what is the market value for the work I perform with my level of experience in this industry and location? How does my compensation compare to that benchmark? The source suggests really trying to step outside yourself. Imagine you're the supervisor or the HR department or even a consultant analyzing the role. What does the data say about the value of this position and the skills required? You strip away the I deserve feeling and look at the cold, hard facts.
And this process forces a clear, actionable outcome, which is much better than just stewing in resentment. What happens if the data does support the feeling?
If your objective research looking at salary surveys, similar job postings, talking to recruiters maybe confirms that you are significantly underpaid compared to the market rate for your actual contribution, well then the thought isn't just an imaginary complaint, it's a reflection of reality. And the rational, actionable solution becomes clear. Update your resume, start networking, look for a new job that pays market value. Or gather your data and prepare a well-reasoned case for a raise. The energy shifts from resentment into productive action.
Okay, but what if the objective analysis shows the opposite? What if you find out you're actually paid fairly, or maybe even well, for your role and experience level in the current market?
Then the self-observation process has done its crucial job. You now have evidence that the original thought, "they pay me too little," is not aligned with external reality. It's an imaginary expectation. You don't need to argue with the feeling, you just need to label the thought. Identified. False expectation, not supported by market data. You recognize it as a product of the imaginary.
And just labeling it as false data helps it lose its power.
It significantly weakens it, because now every time that thought pops up, your rational mind has the counter evidence ready. It stops feeding the resentment loop because, objectively it's not based on fact. Self-observation gives you the tool to make that distinction, which is incredibly freeing.
Okay, here's a practical exercise for you listening right now. Try to recall a specific past event where you felt really bad, maybe angry, frustrated, ashamed. Now, try to observe that memory like you're watching a movie starring someone else. Don't judge, just describe. What was the situation? What was the initial feeling or thought? What action followed? What was the outcome? What patterns, what automatic reactions do you notice now from this detached perspective? That self-observation is tool number one, engaging the rational mind, watching without judgment. But just observing is one thing. We need a way to really track how often these imaginary thoughts are popping up. That brings us to the second tool from our sources, the specular card, which we're calling the mirror card.
Yeah, specular coming from the Latin speculum, for mirror, because that's exactly what this tool does. It provides a clear, simple reflection of those hidden negative thought patterns. It builds right on top of the self-observation skill. You've learned to notice the thoughts, now you're going to measure them. This helps isolate them even more and systematically weaken their hold.
It sounds almost mechanical. Tell us how it works. What does the listener actually do?
It's beautifully, powerfully simple. That's its strength. You need something physical, a small index card, a piece of paper you keep folded in your wallet, maybe a page in a notebook you carry around.
Okay, got my card. Now what?
Every single time throughout your day that you catch one of those false, harmful should thoughts bubbling up, whether it's an I should or others should, you simply make a tally mark on the card, a little line. That's it.
Just a mark. No writing down the thought, no analyzing it in the moment.
Nope, just the mark. Then, at the end of the day, you take out the card and you count the total number of marks. That's the entire process. Notice the thought, mark the card, count the total at day's end.
Okay, I have to admit, that sounds maybe too simple. How does just making tally marks and counting them actually do anything to dismantle something as powerful as the imaginary?
The magic isn't just in the marking, it's in the stance you take while doing it, especially during the counting phase. This goes back to that crucial rule of non-judgment, but amplified. The source material is incredibly strict on this. When you count those marks at the end of the day, whether you have 2 marks or 200 marks, you absolutely must resist the urge to judge yourself.
No feeling proud if it's low, or ashamed and angry if it's high.
Exactly. No emotional reaction to the number itself. Think of it purely as data collection. You are simply counting objective events, like counting red cars you saw today, or apples in a bowl. If you look at your card and see 50 marks and think, oh my God, I'm terrible, I'm so negative, guess what? That judgment is the imaginary trying to hijack the process, trying to turn the tool against you by generating shame. You have to treat the number as neutral information. 50 marks is just 50 data points about the frequency of a specific thought pattern today. Full stop.
Okay, that non-judgmental counting feels like the real discipline here. What about practical issues? What if you forget your card or forget to mark a thought? Does it ruin the process?
Not at all. Life happens. If you forget your card, you make a mental note or maybe tally on your phone's notepad temporarily. If you realize later you missed marking a thought, you just let it go and catch the next one. There's no penalty. Consistency over time is the goal, not perfect, unbroken vigilance from day one.
And what if someone sees, say, 80 marks on their first day and feels totally discouraged? Like, this is hopeless.
That's actually fantastic data, seriously. Seeing 80 marks isn't failure, it's success at detection. It means you successfully identified 80 separate instances where the imaginary was active. That high number gives you incredibly valuable information about the scale of the pattern you're dealing with. It's much better than just feeling vaguely unhappy all day and having no idea why or how often these thoughts are hitting you.
So the number itself becomes diagnostic. Maybe you notice most marks happen during your commute or when interacting with a specific person.
Precisely. You start seeing patterns in the data. 60 of these 80 marks seem to be others should drive better thoughts. Or, wow, almost all my marks today were I should be more productive thoughts during work hours. The card illuminates where the imaginary is most active in your life.
Okay, that makes sense. But now for the really intriguing part. The source claims that if you do this marking and non-judgmental counting consistently, the frequency of these thoughts will actually start to decrease on their own, often without needing a lot of deep analysis of why you have them. How does that work? That sounds almost like magic.
It does seem a bit magical, but it's rooted in cognitive processes. Think about how the imaginary usually operates in the background, fueled by emotion, largely unexamined. It thrives in the shadows. The simple act of noticing the thought enough to make a rational physical mark brings it out of the shadows and into conscious awareness. You're applying a rational measurement to an emotional phenomenon.
Okay, so you're shining a light on it.
Exactly. And by doing that, repeatedly noticing, marking, counting without judgment, you're essentially training your brain through repetition. You're shifting cognitive resources. Every time you mark the card, instead of just getting swept away by the feeling, you're strengthening the connection to your rational, observational self and weakening the automatic emotional pathway the imaginary uses.
It's like you're building a new neural pathway, the notice and mark pathway instead of the feel bad and react pathway.
That's a great way to put it. You're creating a new habit. The brain starts to learn unconsciously that these should thoughts are being monitored and filed rather than being allowed to run rampant and dictate behavior or mood. They lose their power because they're constantly being observed and documented neutrally. It's like a background app that keeps getting flagged by the system task manager eventually. The system learns to allocate fewer resources to it, and it runs less often. The frequency diminishes naturally because the pattern is being consistently interrupted by rational observation.
Wow, so it's not about fighting the thoughts directly, but about changing your relationship to them through measurement and non-judgment. That feels very empowering because it's something anyone can do physically.
It takes the abstract idea of working on your thoughts and makes it concrete. Pen, paper, tally marks. Simple, direct action.
Okay, let's quickly recap the steps so listeners can try this immediately. 1. Get a card or notebook. 2. Every time you catch a problematic should thought, make a tally mark. 3. At the end of the day, count the marks. 4. Crucially, do not judge the number. View it purely as data. 5. Do this consistently and observe if the daily total starts to decrease over time.
That's the process. Simple mechanics, profound potential impact.
So the reflective question here is pretty direct.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to give yourself the chance to try the mirror card technique for just 1 week? Just to gather that initial data about your own thinking, what might you learn from simply measuring? #tag outro.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, the core message, the real promise here, is about giving yourself permission, really, to feel better, to step out of that exhausting loop. Living fully in the imaginary, chasing that perfect, unreal self, constantly judging reality against it. It's a recipe for ongoing anger, frustration, and feeling like you're never quite enough. Because the standard itself is impossible.
But it's not a life sentence.
Not at all. You've now got a conceptual map understanding the imaginary and 2 very practical tools. First, the heavy lifting of self-observation. Using your rational mind to notice your reactions, choose effectiveness over emotion, and test your thoughts against reality.
And second, the mirror card. That simple, elegant way to measure those harmful shoulds without judgment, and through that measurement, train your brain to rely on them less.
It's about reclaiming agency through awareness and consistent, rational practice.
So the challenge we leave you with is straightforward. Give it a try. Commit to 1 week. Practice observing your reactions, especially when you feel that friction. And use the mirror card. Just mark, count, and don't judge. You might be genuinely surprised how quickly the simple act of paying rational attention starts to loosen the imaginary's grip. The measurement itself begins the change. And remember, don't just believe what you're listening to right now. The real value comes when you put these ideas to the test for yourself. Experiment with them. See what resonates. Make them your own.
Absolutely. The understanding is one thing, the practice is everything. Remember, the power is yours.
I am not the center stage, not the crown, not the cage, not the voice that says I am owed, while the world carries my load. I am not the flawless face, not the winner of some race, not the one who must be praised.